Don't stop.
Hi, thanks for joining me on the Everything and Anything and a Bit Gay podcast. Today I have a new guest. Her name is Lisa Sugarman, and she has thehelphub.co, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things today. So welcome to the show, Lisa. Thanks so much for being on.
Oh, thanks, Zach. Thanks for having me.
So tell me a little bit about, you had a lot of things that kind of happened in your past where you dealt with three basically people that you lost to suicide. Can you kind of just tell me that story and then we can talk about a little bit how you kind of started the Help Hub?
Yeah, absolutely. So my story starts way back when I was 9 years old. My first experience losing anybody at all was losing my cousin. He lived up the street. He was 18, I was 9. So there was a big age gap there, but he was somebody who was just present in my life from the time I can remember. And he took his life, and it was my first experience with death. It was my first experience with a suicide. My parents were both pretty open and honest with me about what had happened to a point, as much as they could be. And then I lost my father a year later. He passed away from what I was told was a heart attack. I was 10 years old. I had no reason to disbelieve it. He smoked very heavily. I knew there was heart disease in the family. It wasn't anything I ever questioned. So I lived my life believing that my dad had died of a heart attack. And then about 4 years ago, my husband and I lost one of our closest childhood friends since the time we were 5 years old. He took his life. So it's just been this ever-present kind of loss in my life. And
Yeah.
I learned about 11 years ago, very much by accident, that my dad actually did take his life. So
How did you find that out?
it was just a crazy conversation with a family member who we bumped into, hadn't seen in a while. She was asking about our kids. We were asking about her kids. And in the course of that conversation, out of the blue, she just kind of pulled the pin on a grenade and threw it in my direction and said, have your kids had the same mental illness that your dad had? I had absolutely no idea what she was talking about.
And did it make you have to go through that again of losing him?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, the sequence of events after that initial conversation didn't lead to discovering his suicide immediately. It took a little bit of time. I went kind of back to my mother and had a conversation with her. I never intended to ask if my father had taken his life. It was never on my mind, even after that conversation. But something must have been there subliminally, because the next time I was with my mother, we were talking about my dad, and I asked if he was depressed. I had never asked her that before. She said yes. At the very end of his life, he was depressed. And then before I even knew it, I was asking her if he had taken his life, and she said yes. And it just like rewound the clock for 35 years, just brought me right back to that first day, first minute of losing him all over again. And now all of a sudden I was a suicide loss survivor, and I have no idea what the hell to do with that.
Yeah. So you have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Were you worried about suicide with them since that happened with your father? Did that cross your mind at all?
It did, but not until a little bit later. Those first couple of years after learning that my dad had taken his life were just chaotic. My brain was just in 1,000 different places all at once and nowhere all at the same time. It just was so surreal for me for a long time. Mm-hmm. And my kids were teenagers, middle school and high school at the time, and they didn't present with any kinds of issues at that time. Ultimately, they both had issues with their mental health. They both struggled with anxiety. One of my older daughters had depression, and have both seen therapists and gone on medication and done incredible work on themselves. But when I found all this out, those things had not surfaced yet. So it wasn't until a few years after I learned about my father that I really started to feel like, okay, it's going to become necessary at some point for me to talk to the girls. And I didn't want to do it until I felt like they were old enough. And when they were in high school, I felt like it was the time. And that's usually when you start to see signs of something. So I sat them down and I explained to them what I had found out and what the truth was, and kind of what that genetic cocktail meant for them and what it could mean for them. Mm-hmm. And just kept the conversation and the lines of communication open, and just made sure they understood that if things did come up for them, they could talk to us, they could talk to each other, they could find a therapist. We'd be there to support them. And ultimately it did, but it definitely was something that we all had to come to terms with in our own way, because it was very different from the past that I had my entire life.
Yeah. Whenever you think about like all the things that are, and I don't want to get political in the show, I try to stay away from it. It's hard not to in today's world, but whenever you hear about the 988 hotline being taken away or possibly being shut down because the government doesn't want to fund it, or they want to for whatever reason, what do you think? I mean, like, suicide is so much of a part of our culture today that people are trying to prevent it, and then taking away a hotline like that, I just don't, it doesn't make sense. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, like you, I don't like to get political either, but it's hard to stay away from it, especially when things like that are on the chopping block, things that make absolutely no sense.
No sense.
Things that will end people's lives, things that will harm people, that will take away the safeguards for protecting people who may not have any other way of protecting themselves. Because you got to remember, these lifelines that exist, those are functioning for people in large part who maybe don't have insurance, who don't have the means to go to a therapist or have that kind of support. So it's literally a lifeline. For me, it's a complicated question. There's a lot of intersectionality for me with the question you're asking, because number one, I'm a crisis counselor. I'm a certified 988 crisis counselor. I've been a crisis counselor on the Trevor Project's Lifeline for 3 years.
That's awesome. That is amazing.
So, thank you. It is one of the gifts and joys of my life. It really is, being on the Lifeline. And I also, and I know that a lot of what they're talking about is really focused toward lifelines that are for the queer community. And I'm a member of the queer community. My daughter is part of the queer community. I'm a counselor on a queer lifeline, and I see what these lifelines are for people who are in crisis, how they help, how they inject people with hope when they're hopeless and they show up on the phone wanting to end their life. And it affects me in so many different ways. It makes me so unbelievably angry. It makes me sad. It makes me feel like everything is going in the wrong direction. We're prioritizing things that are ridiculous. I don't want to go into so many of the things that are now federal priorities that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And a lifeline is not a priority. I cannot see the wisdom in that at all. It's absurd, and it makes me furious. And
I wonder if they just look at the numbers, though, of how many lives were saved, whether they're queer lives or not. I mean, it could be a mother that is going through an issue with whatever. It could be anyone that's calling this line. So they should really look at the numbers on how many people have been saved by these type of lifelines, and to think that those people couldn't be here today if how many, I don't know. I just can't wrap my mind around why they would take that away.
It's a financial decision. That's the sad fact. There is no emotional side. There is no human side of the decision that's being taken into account. It's just slashing whatever the government is now considering to be non-essential. And I can't imagine who would ever think that a lifeline is non-essential.
Yeah.
But these decisions are being made in an incredibly small vacuum. Yeah. And there is not a lot of thought or rational data or opinion being factored into these decisions. And it's very unfortunate, because a lot of people are going to be lost because these lifelines don't exist. So if you're listening to this conversation and you're someone who has maybe called the Lifeline in the past and it's been helpful to you, call your senators, call your representatives. We are all out there. The Trevor Project has got, I'm circulating a petition to your local government officials to try and make sure that we elevate it to a priority to save it and preserve it, because it needs to be preserved.
So tell me a little bit about what you do with the Trevor Project, because I mean, it's such an amazing organization, and thank God it's there. I mean, it's so amazing. So what's your role?
So for anybody who's listening who does not know what the Trevor Project is, We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to providing crisis and support services for at-risk LGBTQ youth. We have a pretty specific age bracket, so our demographic is ages 13 to 24. That being said, we get calls all the time from people who are out of our demographic, and we, of course, will take every single call from anyone that we ever get. But that's our primary demographic, is youth in crisis. And we do a lot of things. We've been around for 27 years, which a lot of people don't necessarily...
I didn't realize it was that long.
Yeah. It's the origin story is pretty interesting. There were 3 movie producers, and they started it as it was a short film that won an Oscar back 27 years ago. And it was about a boy who was struggling with his sexuality and was getting bullied. And when they were going to feature this film during the Academy Awards, they wanted to have some kind of support in case there were at-risk youth. So the producers decided to put a helpline in place for the night of the Oscars. And they got something like 1,500 phone calls that night. It has been running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsors. Okay, and now back to the show. And do you think that, in some ways, the world is more accepting of the LGBTQ? Whenever I was in high school, you never would have been able to come out. I grew up in Miami, and it was the Cuban macho culture, and you wouldn't come out. You would have been beat up or killed probably in Miami coming out in the 90s. But now, I hear that same high school that I went to, that kids are coming out in high school now, and it makes me so happy that people feel more comfortable coming out. But that's not the case everywhere, because if you go to the middle of the country a lot of times and you're not in, you go to Idaho or you go to one of these Bible Belt states, kids aren't coming out and they're scared and stuff. So like the Trevor Project is just something that is so needed in the community still. But my question to you is do you see less calls coming in, or do you see more since the population's grown and more people are feeling more able to come out?
Granted, I've only been on the Lifelines for 3 years. I know that just in the past year, not even year, 6 months, pretty much since the most recent election, we have seen such an incredible spike in our call volume because people are terrified. Like you said, we've made improvements, we've made advancements, but at the same time, too, there's a bit of a backslide, too. A lot of our rights are under fire. A lot of rights are being taken away and questioned. And it's a tough time. It's just a very, very difficult time to be a human right now in this country, let alone to be a marginalized community member.
Yeah. And
if you're part of the queer community, then you are. And it's tough. And so we have definitely seen an increase because people are they're terrified. But back to your original question, I want to make sure that I answer it about what do I do on the Trevor Lifelines.
Yeah.
So it functions the same way 988 functions. In fact, we all kind of get each other's overflow at times. People will call not just because they're suicidal, which is what a lot of people think when they think of suicide and crisis lines. They think like, well, I can't call. I'm having a bad breakup and I'm in a depressive state. There's no way I can call a lifeline. Yes, you can. It's for anybody who's experiencing any kind of mental crisis. And for you, what might be stressful, it might not be stressful for me and vice versa. So it's all subjective. So maybe you're dealing with abuse. Maybe you're dealing with homelessness, or you lost your job, or maybe you're terrified to come out, or maybe you are suicidal. Any of those things are a reason to pick up the phone and call us at a lifeline. And Trevor happens to have a few different elements to our platform. So we have our traditional pick up the phone and call 866-488-7386 and get someone like me.
Yeah.
Then there's also a texting platform, which some people don't know exists. You just dial 678-678-START, and you can talk to somebody over a texting app instead. So we have a lot of different options. We also have a big community space, a moderated and safe, protected community space called Trevor Space, where people can go and connect with maybe other youth or other young people who are dealing with the same issues in more of a conversational, without crisis counselors. It's more of a find other people who are dealing with what you're dealing with and get connected and find out how they're handling what they're handling. So we have lots of different services, including a huge directory of assets and resources.
Tell me a little bit how you got the Help Hub started. Like, why? Why did you start it? And tell me a little. Tell the audience what it's about as well.
The Help Hub is one of, now at this point, it's become one of the largest, most inclusive destinations online, free destinations for mental health resources, tools, and content.
Okay.
And so I'm the one who manages the Help Hub. It is my website transformed from what it used to be, the place where I used to kind of, showcase the work that I did. It really just has completely transformed in the past year into a place where anybody in any community can go to find the resources that suit their unique needs.
Yeah.
And here's what makes it a little different. And the impetus for me for creating this was really just an interest in finding resources for people, like being on the Lifelines and being so involved in helping people connect with the resources and support that they need. I was always accumulating all these resources. And so I would add them to my little resource page on my old website, and then it would end up becoming this crazy, unwieldy, long list of resources that had no structure, and you really would have to invest a lot of time to go through this
to search
list.
it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I really kind of broke it apart and realized that what I felt people needed, and I couldn't find it myself, so I started to build it, was a one-stop shop that was free, that was accessible, where people could go to find resources that suited them. Like, let's say we're part of the BIPOC community. What you might be experiencing in the BIPOC community, if you're dealing with grief or loss or mental illness, might be different than someone in the queer community is experiencing, or Latinx community, or a veteran, or the elderly. So everybody goes through the same stuff. They just go through it and experience it in a different way depending on their community and their background.
Yeah.
So I wanted there to be a place where anybody in any community could go and be like, oh, okay, I can find resources for the AAPI community right here that suit me and my needs, while somebody else could find something, some crisis resource, or if I'm a parent looking for resources for my kids, I can find it in the same place, just on a different tab.
Yeah.
So that's really essentially what the Help Hub is. You land on the homepage and there's a very big, very easy to navigate grid, and the grid has just whatever the category might be. It might be mindfulness or grief resources or crisis support resources, and you click on that and you'll find resources that have been vetted. Everything has been vetted by me, and you don't have to think about it. You don't have to research it, because when you're in a headspace that is not a healthy headspace, last thing in the world that you want to be able to do, or that you have the capacity to do, is look for help.
Researching it, yeah.
Yes. So the idea is you're really only a click or two away from getting the help that you need quickly that gets geared to you specifically.
I want to just kind of go back to the Trevor Project just for a moment. How does it feel to know that you have helped all these people and that you've probably saved many, many lives? Like, what is that feeling that you have? And do you ever take a minute to stop and kind of reflect back on that? Like, do you ever, Saturday night, you're just sitting there having a glass of wine or something, you're thinking like, oh my God, like I made such a difference in this many people's lives. Do you ever do that?
All the time. I do it all the time. It's interesting. I'm looking off camera right now to the only photograph that's on my desk right now. And it's a picture of me and my dad. And I must be probably 8 years old. It was a couple of years before he died. It's the only picture, I think, that exists, one of the only ones of the two of us together.
Okay. Every
single time I sit down for a shift, I kind of blow that picture a kiss and I say, let's get to work. And I feel like we take these calls together, and I take every single conversation that I have with anybody, regardless of what it is that's troubling somebody. I take every conversation as a gift, because that's what it is to me. The opportunity to, in some cases, really truly talk someone off a ledge is unlike any experience I've ever had in my life. And I remember when I was considering going through the training to become a crisis counselor, I'm an empath. So I feel everything really deeply, and I always have. And I know my family, my mother, my husband and kids were all a little worried that me being on crisis lifelines, I was going to want to invite everybody over. Come have dinner. Come, let me hug it out. Come, you know, let's be friends. I can't do that. It's not, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
But I promised them that if I felt like it was too much for me, too triggering, too emotional, I would find another way to get involved. But so far, 3 years later, somehow I have the capacity, or I've learned how to navigate these calls and these experiences to be able to just dial in and be there for these people who call. And I remember my mother saying when I first got on the lifelines, all you have to do is save one person and you've made everything you're doing worth it. And that happened the very first day.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. It was the very first solo call I ever had, was almost a 4-hour long imminent risk in process suicide attempt. And it was the very first call I took.
What is a typical, and I know there's probably not a typical, but give me an example of a call. Because 4 hours, do you stay on as long as they need to?
Yes. Yep. That's one of the things that it's a criteria. That's one of the things that happens. We have to be prepared to see the call through from beginning to end. Now, that doesn't mean that we're necessarily alone. We are on a network and we're on the phone call alone, but we're also on a network. If anyone knows what Slack is, it's just an internal, it's a messaging network. And we're always slacking with other counselors who are online and supervisors, and there are clinicians. And if we have issues or questions or concerns, or we really need to get a little bit of help helping someone that we're talking to, there are people there who can kind of in some ways chime in, but I'm the only one, or whoever's on the phone is the only one taking that call, and we're on that call until that call is over and until we've de-escalated the situation and we have a safety plan in place and we know that that person is safe. That's it could be 15 minutes, it could be 3 hours, it could be anything in between. And I've had every range, but there is a sequence of events. I mean, there is there's definitely a flow, and the way most calls usually go is that I'll answer a call, and immediately I ask whoever it is, what name can I call you that you're comfortable with? It's up to you whether you give me your real name or not. Some people do, some people don't. I ask, where in the world are you? What city and state are you in? So be prepared to be asked that. Some people decline. That's fine. We don't take things like phone numbers. We don't take last names, things like that. But we just want to help pinpoint resources for you, maybe in a more specific way. That's why we ask, where are you in the country, so I can find resources. And then we just start talking. And I usually will always ask, what's going on today? What made you feel like you wanted to call or you needed to call? And then someone will go into it. And sometimes someone is extremely dysregulated right away. Like sometimes they're already in hysterics when you pick up the phone, and you've got to kind of navigate that phone call. And a lot of what happens next is just building rapport. We're really just trying to connect with people and make everybody feel comfortable. And then it's really a series of questions. Within the first 5 minutes, we have to do what's called a risk assessment, because we need to know what state of mind you're in before we can really facilitate the rest of the conversation. Like if you're calling because you had a bad breakup or because, you lost your job, it's very different than if someone's calling intending to end their life right then and there. Yeah. That's very different. So we have to find out if you're thinking of harming yourself. And depending on how someone answers, it's like, think of it like a decision tree. We ask the question, and then either they say yes or they say no. And depending on how they answer, we go down one side of questions or the other side. So if it's a no, they haven't done anything today and they haven't been thinking about suicide, well, then we just continue the conversation. Like, what's going on? Tell me, fill me in. And if it is a yes, I am feeling like harming myself, or I am planning on killing myself. Well, have you done anything today to harm yourself? And when are you thinking of doing this? And how are you thinking of doing this? And so that's how the line of questions continue. And again, it depends on how imminent something is. We kind of have a checklist. If someone says, I'm doing this today, and this is how I'm doing it, and this is when I'm doing it, well, if it's within 24 hours, that's an imminent risk call. And we're in it until the very end of that call, until we can hopefully either get you dysregulated or re-regulated, and we can get you the help you need and support. Sometimes we have to do an intervention. we hope that it's maybe voluntary. Sometimes on the rare occasion that someone just can't help themselves, we have to intervene and get authorities involved. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But it can. So that's really generally how it goes. And then if it's someone who we really have to navigate carefully, we'll try and create a safety plan. We try to make sure that they know what they're doing after the phone call, how you're going to take care of yourself, who's your support system, do you have a therapist, do you need a therapist? So
yeah,
that's kind of how it goes.
Has the transgender community calls gone up a lot since this new administration has come in?
They have. Yeah, people are terrified. Yeah. I mean, the queer community is on fire right now.
Yeah.
And in particular, the trans community is on fire right now. And people are feeling it. People are terrified. People don't know if they don't feel safe anymore. They don't know how they're going to get their medication. They don't know how they're going to get treatment. They are afraid of being outed. They're afraid of losing everything that they've gained. And they're afraid of their identity being compromised or questioned. And it's terrifying. It's heartbreaking to hear it. It really is.
Well, I think anybody that does call is incredibly brave for doing it, because I think it's a huge decision to call and try to get help. So, I applaud anybody that has done this. So it's really, brave. That's the best word I can come up with. I respect it.
Yeah, it is. It's incredibly courageous, and a lot of people are doing it for the first time and they don't know what to expect. And that's why it's so valuable when you ask a question like, what happens? What can someone expect? Like, that's so valuable. If there's even one person listening to our conversation and they were considering calling and needed help and don't have an outlet, and now all of a sudden maybe they're less concerned about anonymity, or they're a little bit more comfortable because now they get a feel for what the process might be. That's my hope, is that conversations like this will encourage more people to just pick up the phone and call, because that's what we're there for.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, I think what you're doing is amazing. Your name of your website is thehelphub.co. I will put it in the description of the podcast. Also, if you're seeing this on social media, I'll put it in my social media too. And thank you so much for the work you do. Like, it's really, really amazing. And we need more people like you in the community that care. So thank you for doing that.
You are so, so welcome. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. I'll do it as long as they let me.
Great. So go to, again, thehelphub.co and check the description of this podcast. I'll put in there. And thank you so much for being on, Lisa. You were a fabulous guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Okay. Thanks. Have a good weekend.